Ever feel like words just fail you? Like when you're dealing with something huge, like grief?
Yeah.
It's like, what do you even say, right?
Right. Yeah.
We're diving into something kind of unexpected today. The power of poetry.
Interesting, right? You don't always think of poetry for those big emotions, but
Exactly. We've got some really different perspectives on this today.
okay.
We've got this TED Talk by Daniel Tisdale. He talks about losing his friend and how poetry helped him cope.
Oh.
And then there's Diana Rabe. She's a psychologist, and she's all about how writing can be therapeutic.
I like her already.
Right. And then we'll wrap up with Jennifer Camp and her Loop Poetry Project. It's about how sharing poetry can be so powerful.
So we're covering like the personal side and then connecting with others.
Exactly. It's kind of amazing how many ways poetry can help. Like Tisdale's story about his friend Blair, it really got to me.
Oh,
He
yeah.
talks about how alive Blair was, and how he tried to capture that in his poetry after Blair died.
It's like trying to hold on to a feeling.
Yes. And there's this one poem, just 2 lines. Your telephone's silence is poker played with invisible cards in a blizzard. Wow. It just gives me chills. It's like the words become this whole other thing.
Yeah, you couldn't say that in a normal conversation.
Exactly. And speaking of like not normal conversations, Diana Rabe, the psychologist, she talks about this too, right?
Yeah, she's all about how writing, especially poetry, it can be so healing.
Okay, so how does that work?
Well, she says it helps us get at emotions we bury deep down, like feelings we don't even realize we're holding on to.
So how do you even start?
She's got this great tip. Imagine you're writing a letter to the person or thing you're grieving.
Interesting. So not even worrying about it sounding like poetry, just getting it out.
Exactly, just raw feelings on the page. She also says starting with a strong image or action, that can be really powerful.
So it's more about feeling than perfect rhymes.
Totally. And Rab, she's been through it herself.
Yeah.
She had breast cancer and wrote poetry throughout her experience.
I can only imagine.
There's this really powerful part in one poem where she's talking to her daughters, worried about leaving them too soon. Just heartbreaking, but so real.
It's like when someone's that honest, it makes it okay for the rest of us to feel those things too.
Absolutely. And it's not just about dwelling on the sadness either. Both Tisdale and Rab talk about poetry as healing, as a way to make something positive out of those hard experiences.
Okay, so it's like turning things around.
Exactly. Like Tisdale talks about poetry being a fiery megaphone. It's like you're taking your pain, but making it into something that helps others going through the same thing.
I love that. And it's so true. By being vulnerable, we give other people permission to do the same.
Right. Which brings us to Jennifer Camp and her Loop Poetry Project. It's all about how sharing poetry, being part of a community, that's where the real magic happens.
It's like poetry becomes this bridge, right?
Right.
Connecting us through shared experiences, especially when we're dealing with something as tough as grief. So it's like, we're not alone in this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sharing those poems, it helps us realize that. In camp, she's got these prompts to get people started.
Oh, yeah. What kind of prompts?
Like think about memories or stuff you're going through right now, even dreams.
So, stuff everyone can relate to. It's not like you need to be a poet to do this.
No, not at all. She even talks about like if you're feeling stuck, read some poetry.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it's like you get a feel for how other people use words, the different styles. She mentions the Poetry Foundation on being poetry, good places to start.
Okay, so you're kind of soaking it all up, but then how do you actually start writing?
She's all about just doing it,
Yeah.
Don't overthink it. Just get those feelings out on paper. That's healing in itself.
It's like giving yourself permission to be messy, like what Rab was saying about starting with a strong image, just going with that gut feeling.
Exactly. And if you want to share, she suggests workshops or like online groups like her Loop poetry thing.
Safe spaces.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of powerful stuff, like those descriptions Tisdale gives of his friend Blair. He doesn't just say it. He makes you feel it.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Like he talks about Blair's laugh, the punch of the sudden burst, followed by a rapid rippling, often with a wheeze or two, as he had to toss back his grinning face or curl it forward.
I can practically hear it just from those words.
Right. And he doesn't shy away from the tough stuff either. Remember that line about Blair's phone? Poker played with invisible cards in a blizzard.
Man, that's grief.
It is. And it's like metaphors like that, they can express stuff that regular words just can't.
It's like finding another way to say the unsayable.
Totally. And that's what both Tisdale and Rab say is so important, right from the heart, not the head.
So don't overthink it.
Yeah. Quiet that inner critic, just be present.
Which, let's be real, that's scary.
For sure. but also really freeing.
So it's not about like ignoring the pain, it's more like making room for it.
Yeah, letting yourself feel it so you can heal and grow.
Yeah.
And that can reach other people too,
Like that fiery megaphone.
Exactly.
Yep.
Someone out there needs to hear what you have to say. And Camp's Loop Project, it's that idea in action, creating a space to connect and share those experiences.
We've covered so much, the personal side, the community aspect. It's amazing how many ways poetry can touch our lives.
Yeah.
It's like anyone can find healing through poetry, even if they don't think they're a writer.
Right. You don't have to be a poet to get those benefits. Just the act of writing itself can be so powerful.
It's like having this conversation with yourself.
Yeah. Getting to know those hidden parts of yourself.
And for folks who do want to share, there's those groups, like what Camp talked about.
Exactly. Those safe spaces are so important. Find your people.
So as we wrap up here, I'm curious, for anyone listening, think about something you've been carrying around.
Oh, yeah.
An experience, a feeling, a memory, something you haven't quite put into words yet.
We've all got those.
What if you tried exploring that through poetry?
Just imagine what would it look like on paper.
Don't overthink it.
Just let it flow.
You might surprise yourself.
You never know what you'll find.
And hey, maybe it sparks something bigger,
Healing.
Connection.
Creativity.
It all starts with that first line.
One word, even.
That's all the time we have for this deep dive, everyone. We've covered a lot. Hope you enjoyed exploring the power of poetry with us. And until next time, keep those minds curious.